Okay, so I really wanted to give a little more detail and explanation into the different posts on the Padlet and kind of some background into designing the emergent curriculum. So when we look at that phrase, emergent curriculum, and what it means to you, you can kind of discern what curriculum means, run a course, make your way around. But then when you add emergent, so the idea that something is changing and that it's in the process of coming into being, we really get a clearer look at what emergent curriculum could mean. After reading this book, I've really come to interpret it as being a dynamic way of describing and using the constructivist teaching ideas. Uh, Emergent curriculum uses inquiry-based strategies. It's based in a certain approach called the Reggio Emilia approach, and we use those strategies to respond and plan based on what the student or the group is interested in. Learning can be seen as an organic process. It develops and responds to the associations that are being made with the inquiry. So, some perspective, the Reggio Emilia approach, which comes out of a small town post World War II in Italy, um, kind of similar to, we've got the Montessori approach that came out of Italy as well, out of Rome. You have some other ones, the Waldorf approach to learning, US based one called High Scope. This approach, which is what emergent curriculum comes from, it really centers around the image of children and teachers as capable, resourceful, and powerful protagonists of their own experiences. Within the approach, there's kind of some three facets, I would say, that make up the theory. So they are expansive values, expansive ideas, expansive practices. I'll touch really briefly on them. In terms of relationality with a value, this is the idea that we all are connected and we have a responsibility to um, think of all living things and our relation to them. Reciprocity talks about kind of the shared power that we have as teachers with students, and there's a mutualness amongst us in the learning environment. And then collaboration, that kind of is a given, but collaboration really speaks to a vision of a more collective and not so much an individualized or independent vision of life. We go into expansive ideas. This is the idea that with emergent curriculum, things are organic. Reggio Emilia states that learning is a it's a living organism. It changes. There's an idea that children are citizens and that they are vital participatory agents in their community. Children are also creators of culture and they have valid thoughts and valid ideas that need to be accepted and displayed within a culture. And finally, expansive practices. So the environment within the Reggio Emilia approach is really the third teacher, and the environment can be the setting, the classroom, anything from you'll see a lot of plants and artwork on the walls, and there's a logistical layout that's very purposeful in the Reggio Emilia schools. Pedagogical documentation is important. It's important that teachers are always listening, observing, and recording that. The 100 languages of learning, this is something that can be linked to UDL, it can be linked to the 6 facets of understanding. There's multiple modalities that we can use within the classroom to to speak to the different languages that children have when they learn. And then finally, there's this idea, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's called progettazione. And this is basically plan forward. The kind of the translation used in the book was reconnaissance, and this is to always kind of anticipate the different routes that students might take in their learning and be comfortable in that and guide them, but know that it could go in multiple different directions. So application, when we're applying this into the classroom, emergent curriculum. It's very similar with the Dreyfus model, skill acquisition. You have the challenge teacher, novice teacher, practicing, and then the master teacher. The challenge teacher would be someone like me first starting out. I read about these things. I wonder how in the world am I going to execute this within the confines of a public school with standardized tests and everything. The novice teacher is someone who's maybe been practicing for a couple of years. They recognize opportunities within the classroom to practice emergent curriculum in project-based learning. They may question their abilities or the time that they have to document, and they may question why it's even important. Um, but then when they move into the practicing teacher, this is someone who's very comfortable in their role. Emergent curriculum is something that they practice every day. It's kind of just part of how they teach. The practicing teacher still may wonder, why do I need to do all the documentation? Why do I need to record all of my observations? They may question revising, editing, um, and they feel comfortable, yet they have some reservation about some of the things within an emergent curriculum that they're not able to execute. And then the master teacher is going to be someone that is very comfortable, very confident. Um, this is kind of a way of just being as a teacher for them. They layer on multiple aspects of the emergent curriculum, whether it be the environment or going on field trips outside and children working with multiple different kinds of materials. The master teacher is very comfortable and able to reflect, and they understand that they aren't going to execute this perfectly, but the difference with the master teacher is they understand they're not perfect and they're able to prioritize the important big questions, the essential questions that need to be relayed with an emergent curriculum. For empathy, I really wanted us to think about what it's like to learn in different kinds of environments. And when I was reading the Reggio Emilia approach, I was really struck with how it might feel as a student to learn in that kind of an environment. And the book really read that way as well. You can really kind of play with it. You're having fun as you're reading and seeing they post all these pictures in the book about the different art projects that children were making to learn about things. And it just struck me the differences between traditional school that I went to and the Reggio Emilia approach. Some of the main ones being the setup of the classroom, strict schedules in traditional schools. Reggio Emilia schools a lot more organic and they change. When we move into what the author describes as a good enough theory, so this is taking the Reggio Emilia approach and applying it into our classrooms that are different culturally. Obviously, we're not in a post-war era Italy, which makes things very different. The author writes about what's a good enough theory, and this places strong emphasis on teacher research, participatory structures of democracy. So this is kind of like children engaging together and creating a democratic way of thinking within their structures. Discipline of self-regulating groups. So when they're in those structures, when they're in those groups, they begin to self-regulate. Each person begins to have a role that develops within the group. And then they move on to the creativity of their design work. And as they're working on projects, they each have a role within the project. It's often very creative. Sometimes it's not successful, but there's definitely a lot of thought, a lot of excitement coming out of the design work. And then this feeds into the Windhorse effect, which is described as kind of that momentum that you start to see and that excitement, the buzz that you can feel within the classroom as students begin to be the protagonists of their own learning. And finally, when we look at self-knowledge, the importance of teacher reflection in emergent curriculum, I really had to think about myself as a new teacher when I read this book, the novice teacher, the beginning challenge teacher, and how was I going to create an artifact around this book that worked with the book versus something that was very different from the book, very structured. So I wanted to create something that was could change with input, can change with colleague participation. My idea was to I had to design backwards because I knew that I wanted people viewing my presentation or my artifact to feel the excitement and the not so structured feelings that I was feeling when I was reading the book. And that was my idea with the Padlet. That's my interpretation basically of the book is when I thought about connecting it with the materials in class, it was natural for me to link my design of the project with kind of how I understood emergent curriculum through the 6 facets of understanding. And when I created the artifact with the Padlet, I was really provided a deeper understanding of how to design backwards. And once I done, I really felt like I had achieved what I set out to do, and that was to create an artifact that changed and that was participatory and could develop. And taking that into my teaching and this book that has all these wonderful, colorful stories, I I really see how it is possible to do a lot of these things and to integrate an emergent curriculum. And although it may happen slowly when I start off and I may do it in one lesson, I can build on that and revise and reflect. And that was very much what I did with this project. So wonderful book, short read, but yeah, it was phenomenal just to see a lot of the pictures and hear the stories.